What is your superpower?
I'd probably say my creativity.
Knowing nerdy trivia.
My superpower is being a good listener.
Devising a million questions.
Helping people.
Making people laugh.
My superpower is that I'm determined and never give up.
Welcome back to Voice of the Community. I do have the pleasure of we're getting to interview Bahar from Raley's, and I'll just give maybe a one sentence or two, but our relationship basically began a few years ago when we started our second round of TAP. And I wasn't really even involved in the very initial, that was Eric, but somehow Raley's came to us that they were having an inclusive hiring and they were doing diversity, and we gave them a tour of Meristem and it really clicked. So we've worked together on a few different things.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I always enjoy coming down here.
Yeah, you're practically part of the Raley's family now.
I know. Well, we've done a training with a few of the store leadership training, 2 years, and then I helped a few people get a job at local Raley's stores in the area.
Yeah.
So I definitely want to talk about that.
Yeah.
But what we attempted to do, we discussed like how to do this, right? And we figured we could go through a little bit of the TAP training, start with that, because Raley's is doing some of the things that we advertise in our training.
Mm-hmm.
And Bahar, of course, has taken our training, and we've even done it at the store, which is very important. We want the person who's the manager to do the training. We start with building a culture, and I feel like when I participated, it was actually in the same building upstairs with the store leadership training. That was building a culture right there. You wanted to build a culture so that everybody in the company understands neurodiversity and hiring.
Mm-hmm.
How does Raley's do that?
Yeah, it's been, slow and I say steady progress over the years. It really started with our leadership philosophy of servant leadership and being able to be part of the community and hiring from our local, community, and the need to connect with the people and to understand individual people, to build the culture. Because each person is going to have different needs. And then the more we learned about neurodiversity and, through our partnership with you and Meristem and the TAP program, really being able to educate our leaders on all the different ways people come to work at Raley's. It starts with understanding each individual's needs and how we can meet them and how we can serve them best as a leader. So that's really helped us establish a culture that is inclusive, that is respectful of each person's differences, and really values what everybody brings to the team.
The whole process for getting a job can be overwhelming for somebody for anyone. But for people with neurodiversity, especially because of their anxiety, I feel like that we've discovered that they have anxiety. Across the board, they have anxiety. So thinking about our training, like when it comes to, the interview. And we've discussed it in the store leadership training, and actually some of the ideas came directly, it was amazing, they came directly from the store leaders. They're actually they were assistant leaders before, right? Now they're going to be future leaders that they're going to be running their own store. But basically that some of the ideas of like, how do you, one of the ideas actually just occurred because I was interviewing at West Sacramento, which somebody was interviewing. And one of the suggestions was to go into an office room, like a private room to do the interview. I don't know where the interviews are normally held, but I assume, but from hearing about it, from the stores, I assume some of them are held in a public, like by the coffee shop, or somewhere open like that. And what are some other ways that Raley's has or can be more inclusive with the interview?
Yeah, even backing up to like the application process, right?
Yes.
Being able to provide people different ways of engaging with us at the time that they're interested in a job. So, through like relationships that we have with organizations like Mersem, there's somebody who can advocate for a candidate potentially. So I know you've done that on behalf of a couple of candidates, where you'll send an email to our recruiting team and then basically initiate the conversation. This person's looking for a job. So if that person isn't wanting to go online and fill out the formal application at that point, that's okay. We can still get them in for an informational interview or even a formal interview. And then we can have them fill out the application there on the spot. That's one way, because we want to remove any barriers people have, right? So we want them to feel like they can engage with us about a job, whether or not they want to actually fill out a formal application online, because sometimes that can be a little bit overwhelming for folks. And then the other thing too, we started doing a few years back, I think in 2018 or 19, was offering 1 day a month where people could come in on site and actually apply in store. So they don't have to go online again. If they didn't have an advocate like you or someone like a job coach, they could just come in and talk to somebody, and then they could use that as the opportunity to
That's wonderful.
pose interest in a job. And then for the actual interview process, we've identified all the different ways that we can accommodate people's needs. And that, so for example, you shared the example of the office. In most instances, yeah, they probably sit out in the cafe area, but where somebody might say, I'd like more quiet, or I get really overwhelmed with a lot of noise, or just I'd like something a little bit different, and being able to ask those questions.
Right, like a where would you like to, and I mean, this was wonderful, like the store leaders, like, where do you want to meet today? Or would you like to, meet in a coffee shop, or would you like to meet in my office?
Yeah. Or in some cases, people actually want to walk and talk. They don't want to sit down because maybe they're fidgety and they don't want to sit at a, like this, formally at a desk, and it's maybe not the most comfortable setting because it might feel intimidating. And so having them walk and talk might be more comfortable, and not having to make eye contact and like the traditional interview setting that most people might be used to.
And also, there's the clock. Also, like, I don't know, I've interviewed before before this job and other things, and like one thing that I feel was really cool here was like recognizing the anxiety. So the store leader would say, "Oh, everyone has anxiety. Don't worry. I'm just going to ask you a few questions. It won't be. We'll try to make it a quick, like that." Instead of just like barging right into it, because I do feel like at interviews that I've been to with other companies, they never acknowledge the fact that you're so nervous, because you're shaking and shivering. And but it was wonderful. And one thing that I have learned about Raley's is the type of job. So we had this individual. Sometimes it can be difficult, because sometimes people it's just a different way that they think. And we have all the time people at Merstem with this issue. They want to be the president of the United States. And I always tell them, like, it's impossible. Like, it's not impossible. You'll get there someday, but here's the step. So we have some people that they see Raley's, like, originally I had somebody that wanted to be in produce. Okay. Easier said than done, because if produce was available, and we were talking to Raley's, to Daniel, and it was like, it wasn't happening. Like, produce, the position wasn't becoming available. And one thing that it seems like, and this is pretty cool for anyone that gets basically a job at Raley's, he ended up applying for the courtesy clerk, but we were informed, like, after he could be working there for a time, he can be self-promoted. Which is, it's pretty cool, because after they've seen, and then he says, I'm interested, and they know he's interested in produce. They discuss it, and then, an opening, would you like to discuss it more or whatever? That's pretty cool that you can do that.
Yeah. I mean, back to the example that you shared earlier when you came and did a training for us, and we co-facilitated the leadership development training.
Yes.
And that's really big, and it's a huge part of our culture. We develop from within. We want to make sure people feel equipped to move up. And in the example you shared, definitely people have the opportunity to promote from courtesy clerk to a clerk job. And a clerk, you could work in produce, or you can work in food service.
Right.
If you like to work in the bakery or cafe, you can work in the, different departments throughout the store. And it really comes down to whether or not the person wants to work back of the house or front of the house, and the different things that they might want to do, and they can have those conversations with their leaders.
And that's another thing, it's not specific. So also we have individuals that they have no idea what they want to do.
Right.
So if you have no idea, you could discover it.
Yeah. And we encourage it.
Yeah.
It helps people be more well-rounded in their understanding of business, but it also helps us as a company. When you have people who are cross-trained, you can be more efficient with your use of resources too. So
Right.
I think it's a good business practice overall to have people who are versatile and can do a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
But again, that's not for everybody, right? So we don't want to force people to feel like that's the direction you have to go. It comes down to asking the questions and making sure the person feels comfortable and they understand the scope of the responsibility.
If Eric were here, he'd be like, congrats. He'd be hugging you.
Yeah,
because
that's his message, yes.
Yeah, because we have, I'll just say an example, like we have somebody that's working at a senior center and they're working in the dish pit. And they're the best dishwasher you'd ever seen. They are the best dishwasher. This person could wash dishes for days and they can wash them quickly. No worries. But people see this individual, and we've even heard, why hasn't he been promoted already? See, if he wants to move up, that's one thing. But if he wants to be if you have a courtesy clerk and they want to be a courtesy clerk for years, nobody, and it doesn't feel like, this is, we are being not inclusive if we don't promote this person,
right. It comes down to what each person wants, and for some people that's enough. I'm going to be the best at what I can do, and I don't want more stress or I don't want more responsibility, and that's okay, because we need great dishwashers. In that example, we need people who want to be good dishwashers. Not everybody has to be the president, right?
So the other thing here is that onboarding, because we're onboarding for Meristem, for our internship, so sort of onboarding is kind of front of my mind this week. But when it comes to onboarding, and there's even this thing about, this is another thing that we've discovered, it's all about disclosing whether, now if I'm working with somebody and I brought them, or a job coach from an agency is coming, obviously the person has something, because otherwise they wouldn't have the agency. But please check it out. So everything, tapautism.org. We did a job seeker training video where we had Bahar, he was amazing, at one of the stores, actually talking about it. But that's a way we've talked to job seekers about promoting themselves.
Yeah.
Kind of like, what am I good at and what do I need support in? Because while it's a nightmare, I'm sure she would get excited. So the idea of disclosure, if somebody says, I've got autism, there can be a legal thing there. But if it's avoided entirely or worked around, you'd be you don't want to go to legal and have to worry about that, right?
I mean, I think it comes down to making people feel comfortable in disclosing what their needs are, right? And back to the example you shared in the interview, where you have leaders who are acknowledging the anxiety. I think when we can do that as an interviewer, regardless of the industry we work in, and help people feel comfortable and safe at disclosing what their needs are, that's emotional intelligence from my perspective. I think it's really important for interviewers to always acknowledge the humanity in this process of job seeking and interviewing, because it's nerve-wracking for anyone. Yeah. And then you tack on folks that are on the spectrum who maybe have other challenges that they have to overcome in communication and the formal and societal expectations that we have of what it is to be a good interviewer, right? To make eye contact and all those things. That's not always the case. To give the definition of customer service, what is customer service mean to you? I don't know. So we have to kind of break down those norms for people to understand that each person you interview with is going to have a different set of needs, but it's your job to help them feel safe and comfortable sharing them with you. Absolutely. So that way we can be more mindful. If we do select that person for the job, how can we set them up for success in their onboarding? Each person's going to need something slightly different. so that way they get what they need to do the job well. It's our job to set them up for success, not the other way around.
That really makes, yeah, that's a heartfelt feeling.
Mm-hmm.
So we're also involved, I'm involved in this business advisory council in Sacramento. So it's a group of businesses and support agencies, some government agencies, Department of Rehabilitation, State Council on Developmental Disabilities, one of our regional centers, there's 21 in California, Alta Regional Center, and we all get together, and the idea is to promote businesses that are doing this, what Bahar is talking about. And so Bahar has actually joined with a few other companies to promote these ideas. And I feel like one thing it can be dangerous sometimes when you're promoting this or when I'm training a company and we start talking about this whole idea of disclosure, they just get worried and they sometimes get shut down. Like, I don't want to have to do any legal thing. Oh my God, you're going to bring me a bunch of people that need like doctor's note or no. I mean, so we just tell the individuals to. It's kind of like building a portfolio of themselves, you know?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
And it might seem like a lot of work for the individual, but it's very important because just so you know more about them and how you can support them.
Yeah, and I think that goes for any candidate, knowing your strengths and knowing your opportunities and going into an interview, being able to talk about them in a way that's productive and that shows that you're mature, right? And you can go into a business environment and do the job that you're interviewing for. Not every job is for every person either.
Right.
So sometimes it's up to the job seeker to understand, like, okay, can I ask questions about the job so I understand what the responsibilities are? I might decide that job's not for me. I don't want to do those things.
Right.
And then that goes back to the disclosure piece too, is like, I kind of already know what my own restrictions are in that way, and so I'm not going to put myself in a position where I can't do the job. That's not going to be good for me, and it's not going to be good for the business.
Absolutely.
And sometimes people need an advocate. They need a job coach or a family member who can help them articulate that in a way that is going to be clear to the job or the employer. But,
so when that's required, I think that is key, because sometimes we say build internal support, have a champion within the company, within the store, but sometimes there does need to be a job coach. I'm not sure what you've seen, but from talking to a few of the stores and just my own experience is that sometimes the best way that I can help somebody is connecting with their job coach. So like we were at a job fair and Daniel was there from recruiting, right? And I had the job coach with one of the people I'm supporting. Their job coach happened to be there, just like exploring the thing. So I seen her. We were having a table, and I had seen her, and I said, "Follow me." And I introduced her to Daniel, and that was my job was done. Because the point is that like a lot of the job coaches come and they work with the individual at the store, and they never meet anybody at the store. They help the individual, but I feel like if they're working on something, whatever that thing is with the individual, time management or organization or whatever, and it's shared that this is a struggle. It could even be that this is a struggle, but we're working on it to the supervisor. They're not going to be as scared, like, why is he doing it this way?
Right.
And if the individual has trouble saying it, the job coach can help.
Yeah, and the job coach is just as much a part of the team as the team member. I've seen a few of our job coaches that are shadowing the team member, and they'll work alongside or kind of like stand very close by.
Yeah.
But if ever there's a question or something that the team member doesn't know how to answer, they'll jump right in and they'll support them. So they're just as much aware of what's happening and a part of the team. And they sit in on conversations about performance, feedback, or different conversations about attendance or whatever the things might be that are going on. So it's the job coach, the leader, and the team member all together working to help them succeed. And that's really what's benefited a lot of our team members who've been with us for a long time. Some even had their job coaches kind of exit because at some point they felt confident enough, like I've established the connection with my leader. I don't really need a job coach anymore. And they've let it go to the point where now they do their thing.
That's wonderful.
And 10, 15 years later, they're still working for the company. So I think that's a good testament to the fact that it works.
And we have been talking to more agencies. We're doing some traveling. Very rural California areas in Plumas County. We're going to Humboldt in January. Just a few different, very kind of rural areas. But we're talking to coaching agencies about how to utilize their job coaches in the best way.
Good.
More like communication things, stuff like that. I have a question. So back to the, this is even maybe a part of the very beginning when you apply for the job, but we were talking right before this about part-time versus full-time.
Yeah.
Most of the jobs that I've seen, the entry level at Raley, start out at part-time.
That's right.
I don't know if they all be entry levels, just for everyone.
Mostly at the store level, yes. Any positions like at the support center or in our warehouse, those are typically full-time. Like in our bakery and some other locations. And then we have other positions where they're on call. So if somebody were to get hired at our warehouse, they start out on call, but then they work their way into a full-time job. So it will depend, but our jobs are all posted with that clearly outlined in the job description.
I've seen some stores, grocery, different places. They seem opposed to part-time because, I don't know, they just say that it's a full-time position, doesn't it? But what we're talking about is like, especially in the entry-level position, it doesn't always benefit the company to have the individual that can't work or sustain an 8-hour workday actually do an 8-hour workday.
Right, and you want to provide flexibility. So you have some jobs that are full-time and some that are part-time because then you can kind of acquire the folks that are either working a second job or in school or maybe have family obligations.
Right.
So we don't want to discount the fact that some people just want to work part-time and that's helpful to them so they can maintain employment and still be eligible for different benefits. But also it benefits us because then you're not locked into a full-time, schedule if you don't have the business need for it all the time.
That's true.
So every business is going to be different, but mostly in retail, I think a best practice is to offer both part-time and full-time.
Yes, some jobs are part-time and some are full-time. When it comes, I'm just trying to say, like we've talked about the individual, but when we talk about companies, I just would like a statement to feel like why it's hard for me to say like why do this. That's like not an easy question for you maybe, but like you're talking to another company. I don't know any company that I haven't communicated. Just why would they want? Because sometimes there may be once they take the training. Usually, once they've taken the training with me and Eric, we've talked for an hour. They're pretty okay with working with us. But sometimes getting them in the door is like, or even I'm part of this business advisory council, like I mentioned, and we have a trouble sometimes with getting employers. Why would an employer? I think it's the smartest thing you could do because don't limit it to anyone. Because you need employers, especially now,
especially in this environment.
Post-COVID, you definitely need as many employees as possible. So, but sometimes they're still nervous. They're like, I'd rather have no one than.
The fact that some organizations don't understand all of the ways in which they can be supported by local agencies, even through like tax credits and some of those things. And there's a lot of financial benefits, but more than anything, it's a benefit to the local economy, to the local community.
Absolutely.
And ultimately to the company. There's lots of reasons why having people who think differently benefits the organization. You don't want robots. You want people who can look at things creatively and differently and bring value to the organization that way. But I know sometimes people get a little intimidated by some of the ways in which different programs work, where you hire folks who may have a job coach, for example, and then you have to get the funding through the agency.
Right.
There's some limitations in some organizations that maybe don't make that.
And they don't
as
understand
attractive.
it, and we don't get rid of that.
Yeah.
We only mention that, the money that you mentioned, we only mention that if they indicate that they need it, they can't afford the individual, whatever, maybe it's a really small business, a mom and pop, but we have to make it easy. And one thing that we're working on is making it clear, because sometimes we've said in our training, which I think our training is wonderful, talentautism.org, it's great, but sometimes we say, oh, it's easy. It's not. It's not. It's just that, like, sometimes maybe there is a lot of paperwork, and so just understanding that, but we will help you. Like, I can walk you through it, but it's true. It's like it can be just a little overwhelming sometimes the way that it's traditionally the way that it's framed.
Yeah. And in our case, even if we don't take advantage of the way that those programs are set up to the full extent, we still benefit from hiring people that are referred to us by those programs. So they're on our payroll, but at the same time, they're given an opportunity to work with an amazing company in their community. They don't have to travel far. They could still have their job coach. So they still get all the benefits that come with being referred to us by a local agency partner, but they're working for the company directly.
No shade to anyone that I work with, but just thinking generally, like when I look at like Maristem, or I look at even Raley's, I don't know every employee at Raley's, but like I'm imagining, like there are some in general, there's always some employees that are not good. And they're neurotypical. Yeah, that is a really true thing. Like, you're so worried about the neurodiverse person screwing up or whatever, and you have a bunch of neurotypical, regular employees that aren't doing their job properly.
Sure, yeah.
So if you're so worried about
everybody,
if you're so worried about the neurodiverse person with autism or the person with anxiety and neurodiversity is going to screw up, but you have a bunch of regular, like, if you're worried, for example, about call-outs, they're going to call out, they're never going to show up. Take a look. Maybe at payroll, where you indicate how many people are, where they get paid, a time off, and you'll see tons of time off. Like, people are taking off all the time. Either they're getting sick, or they're on vacation, or they just don't show up, so they called out today, and you don't know why. I mean, it's happening all the time. And so if you're so worried about the neurodiverse person, it's just, I don't think it's fun. I don't want to make fun of anyone. I just think it's it amuses me, because sometimes a neurodiverse person will call out a whole lot more. The neurotypical person will stay home more than the
Sure. I've read studies that show people with disabilities at work actually are the more consistent ones that come in, that don't call out, that are not late.
A lot of them,
there's definitely some value to that.
Well, sometimes it's also sometimes it's also routine. They do specific routines, and they have to do them.
The discipline.
So if they have to be there at 8:30, if they show up at 8:40, it's going to derail their whole day. So they don't show up at 8:40. They show up at 8:30 because it's better for them to have a routine. I know someone that has so much anxiety about traffic, and he'll show up an hour early because he doesn't. And who cares? I mean, the employee loved that. Right? He's an hour early because he was so worried about the rain and the traffic and the this and the. And your neurotypical person might be 20 minutes late. You don't know.
I think the message in that is that no one person, regardless of what is happening, is exempt from all of the challenges that we face in the workplace. And it's our job as employers to just understand each individual and their needs, because each person is going to be different. That's
true. Any and all of this can happen to any and everyone, whether you're neurodiverse or not.
And sometimes it could be for different reasons. It could be because they're neurodiverse, or it could be that they just had something happen at home that day and it derailed their whole, schedule. And we didn't take the time to ask, like, hey, is everything okay? I think it's really going back to the root of understanding each person, what they need, what are their challenges, what do they like, what don't they like, what motivates them, what makes them, like, to your point, what makes them feel derailed. What if I change your schedule every week, is that going to throw you off?
Right.
If it is going to be totally disruptive, then I'm going to be more consistent with making sure I can give you the same days, and starting times. And where I really have to make adjustments, I'm going to make sure I give you enough heads up so it doesn't completely throw you off.
But this goes back, so we can actually address that in that some employers give an on-call a lot, like extra shifts. Or I understand if someone calls out,
Oh, yeah.
you might need them. But what I mean is that all the time they're getting these shifts that they're not expecting. But your point is wonderful, but I do have to say to the neurodiverse person, the people that are applying, the more specific that you can be about your schedule and your availability, because I've so many times seen it where the neurodiverse person, I'm sitting right there, so it's wonderful because we've talked about their schedule. And when they're in the interview, they don't mention their schedule. Or the employer says, the Raleys will say, what days can you work? Can you work on during the week every day? And they'll say yes, and then I'll be like, but what about your soccer tournament every Thursday? They don't mention it. But if you can get your schedule to the employer as accurate, then the employer, as we're hearing, are able to accommodate, for the most part, keep you to that schedule and give you tons of notice if something needs to change.
Yeah, definitely. That's our desire. Now, it's not always realistic, but we want to make sure that we, give people the adequate heads up they need to adjust their transportation, their life, their schedule, all of the things that happen outside of work, because that's just as important to us as making sure they can get to work on time.
Right.
But yeah, that's just being respectful of each individual and the fact that everyone's got things they need to do. And it's our job to make that easier for people. But, there's a business to run. So it's balancing those two things that's really important for leaders to understand and make sure we're always aware.
Right, because I always thought, it is a business, and so you might have to, but at least you have that flexibility.
Yeah.
So it does seem like easier, And then, of course, they can get support. So you'll have your job coaching agencies, and you can definitely, and that's a big benefit to the company. Trying to think if there's anything. And then, I don't know, a big part of this is the last part of it, and in fact, it's towards the end of the training, is building long-term sustainability for the individual. We call it adjusting and retaining the individual, and adjusting anything program that you have that you need to adjust. But it's, for me, we actually, for the most part, we do this at Mariston, where we have 1,000 meetings at Mariston. Some of the employees at Mariston get annoyed because there's like 1,000 meetings. But one thing, it's a supervisor meeting, and it's not just me with Eric, my supervisor. It literally is every supervisor is meeting with their person at least once a week, hopefully. And sometimes the meetings have to be shifted one thing or another, but for the most part, it's every week, because that builds long-term sustainability. How does Raley's handle something like that? Like I know you do a 90-day, 30-day, and a 90-day.
Well, within the first 90 days, they meet with the team members at least 5 times. So it's within the first 2 weeks, a few touch points are happening. And then again at the 45 days or 30 days and 45-day mark. And then again twice before their 90-day probation is completed. 60-day probation is completed. But the 90 days kind of spans across all of the different ways we support someone's onboarding. And that's really important, just to make sure, the person understands all of the responsibilities that are related to the job they're in, but also we can talk about their future goals. We can talk about all the things that are important to them. So we're starting to combine those things together to create an environment that they want to stay in.
Are they graded on this? No.
It's not really like a formal grading, but there's feedback, right? It's two-way feedback. We encourage the team member to give feedback to the leader and the leader to give feedback. And it's an opportunity to reinforce the good behaviors and kind of talk about what's working, and then also provide some coaching and direction in the areas where they maybe need some improvement.
Right.
And I think it just creates that open and honest communication. So that's happening. And then along the journey, you know, as people continue their career, we definitely encourage more frequent communication with the leaders, because sometimes there's a benefit of overlapping shifts so they can check in every week. But sometimes it's once every 2 weeks or once a month if we have people who work opposite schedules than their leader.
Oh, right, of course.
But it just comes down to people scheduling it ahead of time and kind of knowing what to expect. So they know, hey, on this day, I'm going to meet with my leader. Here's some questions I'm going to have prepared for them. Or here's some things that I needed to make sure they know about, like an upcoming vacation or upcoming,
right.
Or maybe I had a problem with something that happened and I want to provide them some information about it. So I think it goes both ways, just making sure both the team member and the leader are prepared to check in frequently, and
right.
they can establish that some people want to meet every week. Other people are okay with meeting once a month, but I think it's up to the leaders and the team member to decide what makes sense for them.
And then I would also imagine things like go through human resources. The individuals go directly to human resources, or they can go through their manager.
Both. They can do either.
That's good.
Yeah, we have the option for people to reach out to different groups within HR depending on the nature of their question, or they can go through their leader.
That's good, yeah.
But we always encourage open and honest communication.
Open and honest communication is very, very, it's very important.
Yes.
And it's very important, and it's very, it helps make it easier, you know. So I like that, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that we're wrapping up here, but I really wanted to thank Bahar for allowing us to come in, interview her for the podcast, because we do want to get the message out there that it is Raley's, like, come apply, work at Raley's, but what Raley's is doing can be multiplied within other companies, I feel like.
I'd like to think so.
They didn't trademark, like in the hiring of somebody with neurodiversity, right? They didn't trademark anything.
No, and we, you know, a lot of what you have identified in the TAP program, thankfully, were already things that we were doing, but we got a little upgrade through learning best practice from other organizations. I know I met people through MetterStem that work at SMUD, and then the BAC, the Business Advisory Council, and Hire Able, and some other organizations where there's folks at CVS and different retail companies that are aligned with what we do. And it's been nice to be able to bounce off, you know, different questions and ideas with other stakeholders there, because they have the same kind of challenges we do. So it's nice to hear, oh, you tried this program that I want to possibly implement. What did you think? What were your results? And I can kind of hear from them and then try to make the necessary changes to do something different. And my team here has been really great with trying new things and meeting new community partners that we can partner with out in the different locations that we serve.
That's true, and that's what we've done with the BAC. I had an idea, because that's so important, what you just mentioned, like any struggle that Raley's corporation is having, let's say shipping, or let's say in the warehouse, other companies, other grocery, Walmart's going to have the same problem. Like all the other companies are going to have, so joining and talking about it together is wonderful. Yeah,
and the BAC has been great from just I think idea generation kind of environment too, because so many people are passionate about creating inclusive work environments, and maybe just are overwhelmed with where to start, because there's so many different things you want to do, and you have a list of 100 projects, but you only have limited resources. So being able to ask other partners that have implemented them what was the most impactful, I think, is helping us identify, okay, these are the short list now of things that I want to work on, and I know now who I can partner with. And you guys at MetterStem and TAP have been a great resource to me and my team, so I'm thankful.
Before we finish, I just want to ask, is there anything that you want to add? I always ask at the end.
I think we've covered a lot of nuggets. I think the biggest message for job seekers that are out there looking for a job in retail or in any industry is one, just to understand your strengths and understand your opportunities, but also be fearless in advocating for yourself. Surely you can go through a job coach or a family member, but it's really important that you can articulate for yourself what it is that you need and want in a job, because not every job is going to fulfill your needs, and that's okay. That's not a bad thing, but it will help you find a place where you feel like you belong and a place where you can enjoy to work, and that's really important. And the plug for Raley's, when we were looking for folks, is really understanding that everyone has to eat, right? And we're a part of our community and getting people access to healthy and nutritious foods. And if that's something that you're passionate about, Raley's is a great place to work, and we'd be happy to have you on board. And we're always applying or have jobs that we're open to applications at raleys.com/jobs. So.
And what I love about Raley's, just in general, is that they have all the kind of grocery stores. So they have the basic grocery store, which is just like any old day grocery store. But then they have like high-end grocery store, where it's like a higher-end, fancier product, more, so it depends on if you wanted to work in a higher-end retail. They even have what's a marketplace in Roseville where they actually make the food. Kind of like you can get sandwiches and salads and stuff. But really, the gamut and the warehouse, you can almost have any job that you can think of in retail, you could do at Raley's.
Yeah, even behind the scenes in marketing or
Right.
IT for people who like computers. We have roles that span across the whole spectrum of jobs. So there's, warehouse, production, bakery, where you're totally behind the scenes.
I forgot about the bakery, yes.
Yeah, you don't have to meet with customers at all. You're just doing all of the hard labor work, which a lot of people love. And then we have other jobs where they're in the store and they're actually interfacing with the customers every day. And then we have a support center, where we are here today actually at our support center in West Sac. And this is where we serve our internal customers, who are our team members in our stores.
Right.
So we set up programs that support merchandising, marketing, technology, HR, finance, and all the things that you need to do to support a business.
Very
behind the
important work,
scenes.
yeah.
Yes. So again, it just goes back to knowing what you love, what you don't love, and then finding a job that helps you do your best work.
How long have you been with Raley's?
8 years now.
That's a lot. Wow, that's impressive. So with that, we will be back. But thank you so much.
Thanks, Harry.
Of course, Meristem out.